Imagine waking up one morning and finding out that the legal status you spent years fighting for in the United States has been taken away overnight. No warning, no chance to appeal, just gone. Now imagine the green card you've been waiting on, the one that holds your entire American dream, suddenly disappearing as an option. This isn't a future what if. It's happening right now to thousands of immigrants across the country. A massive immigration shakeup has just been announced, and it is changing the game for almost everyone in the system. If you're an immigrant, if you're here on any kind of visa, if you're stuck in a green card backlog, or you love someone who is, you need to watch this video very carefully because what I'm about to explain could decide your entire future in the United States. Welcome to U.S. Immigration Intel, your trusted source for real, up-to-date immigration news, detailed explanations, and practical guidance that actually matters. I'm glad you're here because today we're talking about one of the biggest U.S. immigration policy changes we've seen in years. This single update is affecting multiple visa categories at once, stripping legal status from certain groups and completely shutting down green card options that used to be available. In this video, I'm going to break down exactly what is happening, who is impacted, why these changes are being made, what the legal implications are, and most importantly, what you can do right now to protect yourself and your immigration status. We'll look at real-life examples, go over what's written in the official policy documents, and give you concrete action steps you can start taking immediately. This is information every immigrant in America needs to know. The announcement came just days ago from the Department of Homeland Security and U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services, and it has sent shockwaves through immigrant communities across the United States. The update has several major parts that, taken together, are fundamentally changing the immigration landscape. First, certain types of legal status that were previously viewed as stable and renewable are now being revoked for specific categories of immigrants. Second, pathways to permanent residency, green cards, that thousands of people were counting on have been abruptly closed. Third, new restrictions and tougher standards are being placed on visa renewals and extensions. And fourth, immigration enforcement priorities have been dramatically expanded. Let's unpack each of these pieces so you can understand what's really going on and whether you might be at risk. We'll start with the revocation of legal status. Under the new policy, people who entered the United States through certain humanitarian programs that were created by executive action, not by Congress, are having their protected status terminated. This primarily affects individuals who came through specific country-based parole programs set up in the last few years. The administration argues that these parole programs went beyond what the president is allowed to do and were never properly approved by Congress, so they are now being wound down. In everyday terms, if you entered the U.S. using one of these parole programs, your legal right to remain in the country may be expiring, and you may not be eligible to renew it. These programs allowed people from particular countries to enter and work legally while their cases were being processed. Now, thousands of families are facing the terrifying possibility of losing their work permits, losing their lawful presence, and being placed into removal proceedings. Here's a real-world example. Maria is a 32-year-old woman who came to the United States 2 years ago under a humanitarian parole program because her home country was facing severe political instability and violence. She was approved, granted a 2-year parole, and given work authorization. She found a job, rented an apartment, enrolled her daughter in school, paid her taxes, followed all the rules, and was preparing to apply for an extension of her parole status. Then this new policy was announced. She received a letter saying that the parole program she used is being terminated. Her status will expire in 90 days, and there is no renewal option. She now has to choose between leaving the country voluntarily or staying and becoming undocumented, which would make her a target for deportation. This is exactly what thousands of people are facing right now. Now let's talk about the green card pathways that are being shut down, which for many immigrants is the most devastating part of this update. The changes hit several areas. First, individuals who were on certain parole statuses were previously able to apply for adjustment of status to permanent residence if they met specific criteria, such as having a qualifying U.S. citizen or permanent resident family member, or an employer willing to sponsor them. Under the new policy, people who entered through these now terminated parole programs are no longer allowed to adjust status inside the United States, even if they have a valid sponsor. That means that even if you have a U.S. citizen spouse ready to file for you, or an employer who has gone through the labor certification process, you still cannot get your green card through adjustment if you originally entered through one of these targeted parole programs. You would have to leave the U.S. and apply through consular processing abroad, which carries serious risks, including long bars on returning if you've accrued unlawful presence. Second, the update affects certain employment-based green card categories. There are now stricter requirements for proving that a position truly needs a foreign worker and that no qualified U.S. workers are available. Industries that previously had more flexibility in sponsorship, especially tech companies, consulting firms, and staffing agencies, are now under heavy scrutiny and facing higher denial rates. If you're in the employment-based green card process, particularly if you're from a country with long backlogs like India or China, these added restrictions could push your already long wait time even further. Third, family-based immigration is also being squeezed. While immediate relatives of U.S. citizens are still relatively protected, other family preference categories are seeing more denials and more requests for evidence. On top of that, new guidance makes it harder for people to qualify for waivers of inadmissibility, waivers that many family-based applicants rely on because of past immigration or legal issues. Tougher standards for these waivers mean many family-based green card applications that might have been approved in the past may now be denied. The overall message from these changes is clear. The administration is trying to significantly cut both legal and illegal immigration. Why is this happening? Understanding the official reasoning is important even if you strongly disagree with it. The administration gives several justifications. First, they argue that the humanitarian parole programs created in recent years were an overreach of executive power and built a shadow immigration system that bypassed Congress. They claim that letting people enter through parole and then adjust to permanent residence was never the intended use of parole, which is supposed to be a narrow tool for urgent, case-by-case situations, not a large-scale migration pipeline. Second, they say the employment-based system has been abused by some employers who use it to replace or undercut American workers, and that stronger protections for U.S. workers are needed. Third, they cite national security and vetting concerns, insisting that tighter control is necessary over who can enter and stay in the country. Fourth, they argue that the immigration system is overwhelmed by backlogs and that reducing the number of applicants is necessary to process existing cases more efficiently. Critics, including immigrant rights groups, civil rights organizations, and many immigration lawyers, strongly disagree. They argue these changes are cruel and inhumane, that they break promises made to people who came legally and followed the rules, and that they are driven more by anti-immigrant politics than by real policy concerns. They point out that many of the people losing status are long-term residents who work, pay taxes, and have U.S. citizen children. Forcing them to leave, critics say, will tear families apart and damage communities and local economies. They also argue that shutting down legal pathways does not address the root causes of migration and may actually drive more people into undocumented status. Regardless of which side you agree with, one thing is certain. These changes are real, and they are affecting real people right now. So who exactly is affected? Let's be specific. You are potentially affected if you entered the United States under a humanitarian parole program created in the last several years, especially country-specific programs. You are affected if you're currently on parole and were planning to apply for adjustment of status to permanent residence. You are affected if you are in an employment-based green card process and your employer is in an industry that is now under heightened scrutiny. You are affected if you are from a country with long green card backlogs and these new restrictions will push your wait even further. You are affected if you're applying for a family-based green card and you need a waiver of inadmissibility. You are affected if you're on a temporary visa and we're hoping to move to permanent residence in the future. In simple terms, if you are anywhere in the U.S. immigration system right now, you need to pay close attention because these changes could impact you directly or indirectly. Now let's talk about what you can do. This is the most important part, because you can't control government policy, but you can control how prepared you are. First and foremost, if you're currently on parole or any temporary status, you need to consult with a qualified immigration attorney as soon as possible. Not next month, now. A lawyer can review your specific history and tell you exactly what options you might still have. There may be alternative pathways depending on your situation. For example, if you have a U.S. citizen child who is 21 or older, they may be able to petition for you. If you've been in the U.S. for many years and can show extreme hardship, you might qualify for certain forms of relief. If you fear persecution in your home country, asylum might be an option, although asylum itself faces serious backlogs and challenges right now. The key point is that every case is different, and you need professional legal advice. Second, document everything. Keep organized records of all your immigration documents, all letters from USCIS, your work history, pay stubs, tax returns, proof of where you live, evidence of community involvement, letters from employers, and school records for your children. If you end up in removal proceedings or need to apply for any kind of relief, this documentation can be critical. Also, be careful what you post on social media, because immigration officers can and do look at public profiles when reviewing cases. Third, if you're in the employment-based green card process, talk openly with your employer and your attorney about how these changes might impact you. If your priority date is close, ask whether there's anything you can do now to lock in your place. If you're still early in the process, accept that the timeline may be longer than you expected and plan your life accordingly. Don't make big decisions like buying a house or starting a business based on the assumption that your green card will arrive on a specific date. This update shows how fast the rules can change. Fourth, know your rights. If you're contacted by immigration enforcement, you have the right to remain silent and the right to an attorney. You don't have to answer questions or sign documents without a lawyer present. If ICE comes to your home, you do not have to let them in unless they have a warrant signed by a judge. Learn the difference between an ICE administrative warrant and a judicial warrant. Keep an immigration lawyer's phone number with you and make sure your family members know what to do if you're detained. Fifth, stay informed. Immigration policy is shifting quickly and rumors spread even faster. Follow reliable sources like U.S. Immigration Intel, where we break down complex immigration news into information you can actually use. Be very cautious about misinformation on social media. There are many scams targeting frightened immigrants right now. People claiming they can fix your status or guarantee results for a fee. Be skeptical of anyone making promises that sound too good to be true. Work only with licensed attorneys or Department of Justice accredited representatives. Sixth, if you're eligible to apply for U.S. citizenship and you've been putting it off, this may be the time to move forward. U.S. citizens cannot have their status revoked in the same way, and citizenship provides the strongest protection in an unstable policy environment. If you've been a green card holder for 5 years, or 3 years if you're married to a U.S. citizen, and you meet the other requirements, seriously consider applying now. Yes, there are fees, and it takes time, but the security of citizenship is incredibly valuable. Seventh, consider all your options honestly. For some people, the harsh reality is that staying in the United States may no longer be realistic, or that the risk of becoming undocumented is too high. In those situations, it may be worth exploring voluntary departure, which allows you to leave on your own terms and can sometimes avoid long bars on future re-entry. This is an extremely difficult decision and should never be made lightly, but it's important to face your situation realistically. An immigration attorney can explain the consequences of each choice. To show how complicated this can be, let's look at another example. Carlos came to the United States 10 years ago on a student visa. He completed his bachelor's and master's degrees, then found a job with a company that sponsored him for an H-1B work visa. He's been in H-1B status for 6 years, and his employer filed for his employment-based green card 3 years ago. Because he's from a country with a long backlog, his priority date still isn't current, so he's been waiting, renewing his H-1B every 3 years, paying taxes, and building a life. He married another professional who is also on a work visa, and they have a 2-year-old daughter who is a U.S. citizen. Under the new policies, his employer's industry is facing much heavier scrutiny, and there's a real concern that his green card case could be denied or delayed even further. After investing a decade in building a life in America, he and his wife are now seriously considering whether one of them should look for a job in Canada or Europe as a backup plan. This level of uncertainty and anxiety is what hundreds of thousands of immigrants are living with right now. Legal challenges to these policy changes have already begun. Several advocacy organizations have filed lawsuits arguing that canceling parole programs in this way violates due process and that the changes were implemented without following the proper notice and comment procedures required by administrative law. Some of these cases may eventually reach the Supreme Court. However, court battles take time, often years, and in the meantime, the government is moving ahead with enforcement. Some lower courts have issued temporary blocks in limited situations, but overall, the administration is continuing to implement these policies while the legal fights play out. It's also important to see how this fits into the wider immigration enforcement picture. Immigration and Customs Enforcement has announced expanded enforcement priorities, meaning more categories of people are now considered targets for deportation. In the past, enforcement was supposed to focus primarily on people with serious criminal records or recent illegal border crossings. Now, the priorities have been widened to include essentially anyone who is in the country unlawfully, regardless of how long they've been here or how strong their community ties are. That means even people who have lived peacefully in the U.S. for decades can now be targeted for removal. The combination of legal statuses being revoked and enforcement priorities being broadened has created a perfect storm of fear and uncertainty. What does all this mean for the future of immigration in America? The reality is that we are in a period of major change and instability. We're likely to see continuing policy shifts, more legal battles, and ongoing political conflict over immigration for the foreseeable future. The days when immigration policy stayed relatively stable and predictable are over. Anyone who is in the system or thinking about entering it needs to be ready for uncertainty and have backup plans. If you're a U.S. citizen watching this but you have immigrant family members or friends, there are several ways you can help. First, stay informed about what's happening so you can share accurate information and support. Second, if you're eligible to sponsor a family member, consider starting the process sooner rather than later. Third, be a supportive presence for the immigrants in your life who are going through intense stress and fear right now. Fourth, if you feel strongly about these issues, contact your elected representatives in Congress and let them know your views. Immigration policy is ultimately decided by lawmakers, and public pressure matters. Fifth, support organizations that provide legal assistance to immigrants because many people cannot afford private attorneys and depend on nonprofit legal aid. One more critical warning: be extremely careful about notario fraud and immigration scams. When people are scared and desperate, they become easy targets for scammers who promise to fix their immigration problems. In many Latin American countries, a notario is a powerful legal professional. In the United States, a notary public is just someone authorized to witness signatures and has no special legal authority. Scammers often call themselves notarios and charge people thousands of dollars for services they're not qualified to provide, filling out forms incorrectly and giving bad advice that can permanently damage someone's case. Only work with licensed attorneys or DOJ-accredited representatives. You can verify an attorney's license through your state bar association, and you can verify accredited representatives through the Department of Justice's list of recognized organizations. I also want to address the emotional and mental health impact of all this. Living with immigration uncertainty is incredibly stressful. The fear of deportation, of family separation, of losing everything you've worked for takes a real toll on your mental health. If you're struggling, please reach out for support. Many communities have resources available, including counseling services that are free or low cost. Taking care of your mental health is not a luxury. It's a necessity, and it doesn't make you weak to ask for help. Your family needs you to be as strong and healthy as possible during this difficult time. Looking ahead, what should people in the immigration system be watching for? Keep an eye on additional policy announcements from DHS and USCIS. Watch for court decisions in the lawsuits challenging these changes. Pay close attention to what Congress is doing, because real, long-term immigration reform can only come through legislation, not just executive action. Monitor processing times for your specific type of application, because those numbers often change and can affect your planning. Stay in regular contact with your attorney and make sure they update you on anything that could impact your case. And keep watching U.S. Immigration Intel, because we will continue to cover all the major developments and explain what they mean for you. I know this has been a huge amount of information and it can feel overwhelming, especially if you are personally affected by these changes. The bottom line is this: we're in a very challenging time for immigrants in America. Legal statuses are being revoked. Green card pathways are being closed. Enforcement is expanding. The uncertainty is real, the fear is justified, and the impact on individuals and families is enormous. But knowledge is power. Understanding what's happening and what options you still have is the first step in protecting yourself. Don't panic, but do take action. Get legal advice, organize your documents, know your rights, explore every possible option, and stay informed. If this video helped you understand this massive immigration update and what it means for you, please give it a thumbs up. That helps YouTube show this information to more people who need to see it. Subscribe to U.S. Immigration Intel if you haven't already, because this is where you'll get accurate, timely, and practical U.S. immigration information you can actually use. Hit the notification bell so you don't miss any updates, because in this fast-changing environment, staying informed could make all the difference in your case. Share this video with anyone you know who might be affected, your family members, co-workers, and friends in immigrant communities. This information could literally change someone's life or save them from making a critical mistake. Do you have questions about how these changes affect your specific situation? Are you dealing with one of these issues right now? Leave a comment below and let me know. I read every comment, and while I can't give personal legal advice in the comments, I can answer general questions in future videos, and your questions help me understand what topics you need more information about. Remember, at U.S. Immigration Intel, we're committed to keeping you informed about everything happening in U.S. immigration. These are difficult times, but you don't have to face them alone or without information. Stay strong, stay informed, and take care of yourself and your family. Until the next video, this is U.S. Immigration Intel, and we'll keep watching the immigration situation closely and bringing you the updates you need to know.